Shabbat Shalom, my name is Phil, and we are going to be doing a Torah reading through Leviticus. We are going to start at Leviticus 15. I am somebody who's recently been called to start learning again and start walking the walk of our original body of Messiah. I can't say that everything that I'm going to comment on represents the Hebrew roots and Messianic communities. At the same time, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a minister, I'm not a rabbi. I am somebody who perhaps hopes to be one someday, but I am somebody who is going through and exploring and learning and sharing things as I learn them. And that's the purpose tonight, is to share with you the things that I've found and to elicit some feedback. Anyway, that's really all the disclaimer I need to give. We're going to start with Leviticus. Part of this is to bring our friends in Christendom to understand that there is a lot more to the law than having just been washed away. We're using the Complete Jewish Bible, which is a Messianic Jewish text. There are good Hebrew roots and Messianic texts available that go from the original mother languages of the Bible and don't go through 3 sets of languages before being translated into English. There's a lot of problems with translations, and even the Complete Jewish Bible has a few. Some of the commentary, not the actual translation, but the commentary on the reasons, I found faulty from time to time, but 99.5% of everything commentary-wise is pretty to the point and factual. I've only really found 1 or 2 things that seemed wrong. That being said, Leviticus 15, Complete Jewish Bible version. Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron, "Tell the people of Israel, when any man has a discharge from his body, the discharge is unclean. The discharge is unclean no matter whether it continues flowing or has stopped. It is still uncleanliness. Every bed which the person with the discharge lies on is unclean. Everything he sits on is unclean. Whoever touches his bed is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. He will be unclean until evening. Whoever sits on anything the person with the discharge is sat on is to wash his clothes and bathe himself with water. He's going to be unclean until evening. Anyone who touches the body of the person with the discharge is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and he will be unclean until evening. If a person with the discharge spits on a person who's clean, the latter is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and he will be unclean until evening. Any saddle the person with a discharge rides on will be unclean. Whoever touches anything that was under him will be unclean until evening. Whoever touches anything that, reread that. He who carries those things is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and he will be unclean until evening. If a person with the discharge fails to rinse his hands in water before touching someone, that person is to wash his clothes and bathe in water, and he will be unclean until evening. If the person with the discharge touches a clay pot, it must be broken. If he touches wooden utensils, they must be washed in water. I'm going to stop here and use this as a pause point. This doesn't say penile discharge. This doesn't necessarily include or disinclude. This is probably in all likelihood the same kind of discharge you get from a staph infection. Anybody who's had to deal with staph infection or impetigo knows just how easy it is to spread. And this is a very logical process here. On top of that, as we'll come to understand later on, demons live in uncleanliness and sickliness. Demons can inhabit us when we're sick. Sometimes we're sick because demons inhabit us. But between bacteria, viruses, and all of the pathogens, this is a very logical thing, not the kind of thing that is so easily discounted just because our Messiah has come and died for us and washed us clean in his blood. Because the truth of the matter is, we keep Torah not because it gives us grace. It doesn't give us grace. We keep Torah because we love him And in the classic analogy of the bride and the bridegroom, the Old Testament tells us, that a wife is to submit to her husband. Well, we are the wife submitting to our bridegroom, and the truth of the matter is, he says, if you love me, keep my commands. People will often try to say, well, he completed the Bible, he completed the Torah, he completed, yes, because of him we have a new and an Old Testament, we have the new and renewed covenant. That doesn't mean that he did away. In fact, the next line, when he says, I haven't come to weaken the Torah, but to fulfill it or to complete it. Then he says, truly I say, and not until heaven and earth shall pass away will even a line or a dot be taken from it. That being said, it's all still here. Here we are. I'm here. You're here. The heaven and earth haven't passed away. It's all still legitimate. There's things we're unable to keep to the letter of the law, and we are to keep them in the spirit of the law, which he has given us. That is what he brought. He came and he said, the Torah, the letter of the law says this, but I say if you do this, you're not keeping the spirit of the law. For example, you've been told not to commit adultery, but I say whoever looks at a woman in lust has committed adultery with her in his heart. Letter of the law, spirit of the law. You do both because you love him. If you love me, keep my commands. His commands, he is the fleshly incarnation of Yahweh. The Word was with Yah, and the Word was Yah. He is the Word, the truth, the way, the light. We keep his commands, and his commands are Torah. We do this because we love him, because we submit. Now, the part we're all looking forward to, because somewhere deep down we're all horribly immature and slightly perverse unless we've been born again. And my being born again, I still have a long, long road to hoe. If a man has a seminal emission, he is to bathe his entire body in water. He will be unclean until evening. Any clothing or leather on which there is semen is to be washed with water, and it will be unclean until evening. If a man goes to bed with a woman and has sexual relations, both are to bathe themselves in water, and they will be unclean until evening. I'm going to stop and say that this probably is a masturbation or sex thing. It doesn't necessarily offer condemnation. Beyond that, I'm not going to get into. But what I will say is, if you, as a man, ejaculate, wash yourself. Whatever you've come in contact with, wash it. Whatever you've contaminated, wash it. When sundown comes, you're no longer unclean. That being said, the woman has a discharge, and the discharge from her body is blood. She will be in the state of nida for 7 days. Whoever touches her will be unclean until evening. Everything she lies on and sits on in the state of nida will be unclean. Whoever touches her bed is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and he will be unclean until evening. Whoever touches anything that she sits on is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. He will be unclean until evening. Whether he sits on her bed or something else she sits on, when he touches it, he's unclean until evening. If a man goes to bed with her and her menstrual flow touches him, he will be unclean for 7 days. And every bed he lies on will be unclean. That's important here. As we know, blood is sacred. Blood is both holy and profane. The life is in the blood, and in dead blood, in the case of discharge, it is an abomination to come in contact with it. So if you come in contact with menstrual blood, you're unclean 7 days as well, and you spread that uncleanliness. That being said, we live in a convenience-based society, and we don't want to think about these things and the uncleanliness of it. But you know what? If we love our Father, we have to look at the deeper meanings of these things. And sometimes it comes down to simple obedience. That being said, let's continue on. If a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, not during her period, or if her discharge lasts beyond the end of her normal period, then throughout that time she's having an unclean discharge and she is in nida. She is unclean. Every bed she lies on at the time she's having her discharge will be as the bed she uses during her time of nida. Everything she sits on will be unclean, and with the uncleanliness like that in her time of need, whoever touches those things will be unclean. He's to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until evening. If she's become free of her discharge, she is to count 7 days after that, and then she'll be clean. On the 8th day she is to take for herself 2 doves or 2 pigeons and bring them to the Kohen at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The Kohen's to take one as a sin offering, the other as a burnt offering, and thus the Kohen will make atonement for her before Yah on her unclean discharge. Now, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I believe that we are called to look into, since we can't make the sacrifices at this point, I believe we're called to read through Leviticus and meditate on the deeper meanings and on what it would be to go through and do your sacrifice. I'm not saying go and sacrifice. I don't think we're at a place where we are able to do that. I do believe the final sacrifice by Yeshua has absolved us of the physical need for sacrifice. I don't believe that it has absolved us of the spiritual need to meditate and picture that in our mind. Imagine bringing the pigeons for sacrifice. That being said, I'll continue. In this way you will separate the people of Israel from their uncleanliness, so they do not die in a state of uncleanliness for defiling my tabernacle, which is there with them. Such is the law for the person who has a discharge, for the man who has a seminal emission that makes him unclean, for the woman who is in nida during her menstrual period, for the person, man or woman, with a discharge, for the man who has sexual relations with a woman who is unclean. Now, I'm going to remind you that the Bible teaches us that our body is our temple. The tent of meeting, the tabernacle, these were all, these are what we had before. We had the formal temple, but our temple is inside here. And if we bring this uncleanliness to our temple, we are called to account. That being said, in Matthew and in Mark, Yeshua has said, it's not what you bring into your body, that makes you unclean, but what comes out of it. The parable used is that food doesn't go to your heart, it goes, into your stomach and out the latrine. But people use that to justify eating unclean things, as opposed to understanding that it's the sin that's in their heart they're putting out that causes them to defile themselves. It's not that what you have consumed or what you've come in contact has defiled you spiritually. It defiles you in the letter of the law. It defiles you physically. But what makes you sin isn't what you come in contact with. It's what you put out. That's Leviticus 15. I will continue on to 16 very shortly, and then 17. Until then, may Yahweh bless you, keep you, and hold you close. Thank you.